Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com. Your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. The Off the Hook podcast at offthehooksports.com or Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you go for your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Off the Hook with Dave Hooker starts now.
Welcome. It is this guy, Josh Ward, with a great haircut, and he reminds you to subscribe and like on YouTube. We certainly appreciate that. The response has been tremendous and awesome. I'm not even going to talk about the people that rip me and Josh from time to time, but it does happen in this business. So go ahead and like and subscribe, and we'll show up on your YouTube more often. He is Josh Ward of the Sports Animal. Follow him at Josh_Ward. I'm still trying to remember the story. Actually, I do remember it, but I want you to tell it. Why you're _Ward.
So, well, here's the thing. So I'm Josh_Ward. I took that because Josh Ward was taken on Twitter, but I think the story you're looking for me to tell
The country singer.
Okay, yeah. So there's the country singer, Josh. I have multiple Josh Ward stories. There's the country singer, Josh Ward, who keeps me from hitting page 1 on Google because he's very popular, and I always get tagged on Twitter because these fans go to his shows down in Texas where he's super popular. And hey, saw Josh_Ward at the honky tonk, and I like to retweet it and say, had a great time playing the show. Buy my merch. There's also there's an Australian Josh Ward who has the Josh_Ward Instagram handle, which I wanted to try to match up with my Twitter handle. And he has never responded to any of my messages trying to get that. So he's just posting photos with him and his buddies living it up, traveling in Australia.
Okay, before we get to the Vols and the first scrimmage and not in the top 25, which we are going to talk about the Vols, there is a British Dave Hooker that is an official in football, soccer, and I'll retweet him and I've asked him to come on the show. The times don't really align. But I have retweeted him on several occasions, and he seems to appreciate that. The fact that there is we recognize the British Dave Hooker, so he likes that.
I have no reason to indicate that the country music Josh Ward either knows about me or appreciates me in any way.
That's right.
And I know the Australian does not.
Yes, they're both big dumb compared to us little people. All right, first scrimmage underneath the Vols belt, and you're not going to do any groundbreaking things, particularly in the scrimmage. What battle? Let me just kind of go in wide open. What battle or position are you most intrigued by, Josh?
Well, I think left tackle is just a big unknown, and I think it will be a pretty big unknown on September 1st, and it might be an unknown for a few games. It's a battle between J.J. Crawford and Gerald Mincey. It's very important because it's the left tackle, and you have to protect Hendon Hooker. And I don't know how it's going to play out long term. My guess is that J.J. Crawford is Tennessee's starter in the opener, but I would also guess that we probably see both players. So that's, to me, easily the most important position battle. You have other spots on offense at wide receiver, guys that are competing to either be a starter or for playing time in the rotation at wide receiver. You have guys competing at corner. That competition is actually, it's being held off a little bit because Kamal Haddon's been out for several days now, and he has a good chance to be a starter, but he's not practicing right now and could have used the scrimmage time. But you're going to see a lot of guys out there probably over the course of the season. Tackle is the one where you want to find who your starting left tackle is, and you need that player to play at a high level.
Is there any chance the Vols are mishandling that situation? I want to ask Josh that question. First, remind you, Zool Beer. Downtown Knoxville has the panoramic view of the city. You're going to love hanging out there, but you're going to love the award-winning beer as well. Go to ZoolBeer.com to learn more. ZoolBeer.com, the official craft beer of Off the Hook Sports. Josh, in terms of the way they're handling this tackle position, so old school would be plug the guy in who's played left tackle the year before, which is Darnell Wright. It's your best player. Plug him in at left tackle and figure out the right tackle thing. Okay, but that's not where Tennessee is going in this endeavor. They've already said pretty clearly that Darnell Wright's going to be a right tackle. Josh, what do you think of that approach? Because it is a little unusual.
Well, I do still wonder, do they believe Darnell Wright's at his best at right tackle, and whichever player is going to be on the other side is more comfortable on the left side in the first place? That is something not with Darnell Wright, but with the other two players, Crawford and Mincy, that their experiences on the left side, so they'd be more comfortable. But I do wonder, do they think Darnell is at his best on the right side where he has also played previously and might have the better future in the NFL on the right side? I don't know where he will ultimately end up in the NFL, but he has a good chance to be an NFL player in a year, and I would think there's a good chance that's on the right side. So it's a fair question. Glenn Ellerby said as well that the spots operate essentially the same way. But of course, it's the blind side of Hendon Hooker, and that's why that left side is so important. And if they're going to take some deep shots, there will be plays where they need to make sure he's protected. And he got hit a lot last year. The quarterback position went down a lot last year because of the offensive line, and that was with Caden Mays playing almost the entire season. So having four guys back starting helps, and I think Jerome Carvin on the left side, Dave, has to help whoever is the starting left tackle because of Carvin's experience. But I think it's going to be a question mark for the next several weeks. Tennessee fans just hope it's not a question mark beyond 3 weeks, because if you're going into the Pitt game really unsure about that tackle spot opposite Darnell Wright, well, Pitt's got some guys up front that will try to do something about it.
Josh, if the offensive line is above average in terms of protection, I think Tennessee would probably take that if they're a B plus. They're not going to say that publicly, but also some of this has to fall at the feet of Hendon Hooker, who obviously took over and did a great job last year. But Josh Heupel said something in his press conference after the scrimmage I thought was very telling. Either he was trying to be positive or it's a fact, and for Tennessee fans, better the latter. He said that the anticipation was there, that he was getting the ball out quicker. That's key to pass protection. And as good as Hendon Hooker was last year, I'm not knocking. He can get better in that regard, I believe. I see some clutching, double clutching, and padding.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it was his first year running the offense, first year in the system. He didn't spend August running the first team reps because Joe Milton had won the job and was going to be the guy. And I think we knew that before it was announced for sure that it was going to be Joe Milton. Behind the scenes, they knew what was going on. So he's had a full offseason to understand, to go back and watch what he did last year. And he limited mistakes. He only threw 3 interceptions last season. But sure, when we talk about protection and sack numbers, often the quarterback's going to play and role in what that is. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's not the offensive line. It can be a running back. It can be a tight end. All of those guys will factor in here. But when we talk about the offensive line, we talk about running back, and we talk about tight end, we have to talk about the quarterback too. And Hendon being a year older, understanding more of what he can do. Now, he also is having developed new relationships with receiver. That could factor in. He doesn't have an experienced Velus Jones out there. Javonte Payton, who was new to the offense, as Hendon was, but a veteran who had played a good amount at that point. So that's something to monitor. They're still trying to move guys either in or out, or however you described it. Wide receiver, Bru's a question of his availability. So going out there on the field, game number 1, you don't have that built-up chemistry necessarily yet. That's still a work in progress, but it helps that you have Ball State, not Pitt, for week 1.
At what point do you think Tennessee fans should be concerned about Bru McCoy not being eligible, or do you think there's any point that they should be concerned in preseason camp?
Well, if we tried to roll out a 1 to 10 scale, it's not a 0 ever for Tennessee fans to any question of should you be concerned. Dave, just
you have to drive to the stadium. There's traffic. Scale of 1 to 10. Should you be concerned?
Yeah, it's like a sitting 3. Okay, no matter what the subject is. But all joking aside, I would say give it another week. Tennessee doesn't seem concerned, but we've been down this road. We went down this road with Caden Mays, and he missed a game. Last year, Byron Young had to miss a couple of games. Aubrey Solomon, it was at the deadline. Basketball, it took half a season, which I think actually made some sense with Urosh's sitting time. He essentially sat a year, and that was under the old transfer rules. But for Tennessee fans, that was no fun. So fans have been through this before, and until he's cleared, we don't know that he will be. So I'd say give it another week. But if this time next week you and I are having the conversation, you're asking me, should Tennessee fans be concerned? Then a week from now, my answer will be yes.
Yeah, it's kind of gone from, in my mind, a snap of the fingers to, whoa, maybe this is a concern.
Because, Dave, it's a Thursday opener, so what, a week and a half out roughly. If they start to get into game week mode and they don't know that he is going to be a part of that game, how much are they preparing with him? I don't know the answer to that, but the coaches have to start figuring that out. So once they shift into game week mode, and again, it's Ball State, I recognize, but once they start doing that, I'm sure they would like to know which personnel will be available.
Now, I agree with that, and I think he's key, assuming he lives up to his recruiting hype, and we really don't know because he's moved around so much. On the defensive side of the ball, I thought that Josh Heupel after the scrimmage, and perhaps it was Rodney Garner as well, had some interesting points, and that is to provide more of a pass rush just from the defensive front. Now, they were fine at pressuring the quarterback and playing vertical, as they like to say, Josh. But ultimately, this team will be a lot better if they can pressure with the front four and they can drop some guys into coverage. We talk about replacements, but in this particular case, if you can drop some more guys into coverage, you're helped.
Yeah, if guys can just go and do what the defensive line coach Rodney Garner and what the coordinator Tim Banks is asking them to do, then they're not going to have to overcompensate. And yeah, that can help, I think, in third and long situations when they're trying to go after the quarterback. But also, how often last year did Tennessee have a problem with a quarterback who was mobile and able to pick up yardage and extend a drive with his legs? If you have guys that are able to do their jobs the way Tennessee's coaches expect them to, you hope to run into less situations like that. Tennessee was near the bottom of the SEC in third down stops, ahead of only Missouri last year. And if that's the case again this season, then it's going to be a real problem for Tennessee trying to be better record-wise than it was a year ago. And you're going to run into problems against quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson and Bryce Young, quarterbacks that are going to be able to move against this defense. That can be a problem. Now, it's never easy to go up against a quarterback that's multidimensional. Just look at every defense that has to face Hendon Hooker. But if Tennessee can be better there, if Tennessee has guys in the middle that can play more, because last year Matthew Butler's playing a lot. As the season goes along, those guys can get tired. If they have a true two deep and you have guys like James Pierce and Joshua Josephs that can add what Tennessee's doing on the edge, and Byron Young has a better understanding of what he's able to do out there on the field, then some of that overcompensating, I would think, would go away this year.
He is Josh Ward of the Sports Animal, brought to you by Zool Beer. Great panoramic views downtown in Knoxville. You'll love Zool Beer. Worldwide award-winning beer. Not easy to say, but easy to drink. You'll love ZoolBeer.com. So, Josh, Tennessee not in the top 25. I was a little surprised talking about the coaches poll, which is the sports information director's poll. But I had them pegged somewhere around 18 to 20. What did you think of it? And going into it, what did you think they might be?
I thought they would probably be in that range, 18 to 22 or 3. I thought Tennessee would be closer to 25 than 10, but I do think Tennessee belongs in the preseason top 25, and that's what it's about. Pitt's in the top 20. That's a week 2 opponent, and I think Tennessee fans look at that game as, hey, we better win that game, and I think there's a good chance Tennessee will be favored to win that game when they kick off. Well, the polling has Tennessee 12 spots behind Pittsburgh, so that to me is too wide of a gap. Tennessee versus Kentucky head-to-head, I think Tennessee has a good chance to be the better team. But, the media voted Kentucky ahead of Tennessee, so Kentucky being ahead in this poll is not all that surprising. I'll be curious to see if the Associated Press poll does the same next week. So I thought Tennessee was a little low. Here's the school that I had the problem with, Dave. It would be Texas, and Texas has that first-place vote, which is funny, and that helps jump them up. But Texas last year on defense was embarrassing, and they were able to score some points, but so did Tennessee. And they had a problem with Kansas, Dave. And that, to me, makes it problematic to put Texas in the preseason top 20. Tennessee, to compare the Vols to Texas, Tennessee has its quarterback coming back after a huge season last year. Texas has talent at quarterback, but still has a question mark at that position with Quinn Ewers coming in. Can he be the real deal as people have projected as a recruit? I have no doubt that Texas is going to score points with what they have at running back and what they have at receiver, but can they get stops? That's a question. So I think Texas is too high. I would have honestly flipped them. Tennessee number 18 and Texas number 28.
I would have too. I have zero problem with that. And you talk about Texas, it's incredibly difficult when you start talking about the Iowa States of the world, the Kansases of the world that they mentioned They needed overtime to beat them. It's incredibly difficult to go 5-7 at Texas. I don't care if it's your first year or not. That's Texas. There are gimmies on the schedule, and you should be more talented, Josh.
Should be. And that 23 class that is rolling is still in high school, so they're not there to help yet. So, Texas, I think, will be better. But if you go around the country, coaches that have a lot of pressure going into this year, Steve Sarkisian should be on that list. Now, having Arch Manning and that class together, that's going to help him no matter, I'd say, the result, as long as it's not devastating. They don't go 4-8 or 5-7 again this year. But they have to prove that they're a lot better. Tennessee was definitely the better team last year than Texas. So going into this year, I thought Tennessee deserved more benefit of the doubt than Texas. But it's Texas. They got a number one vote after all.
Who did that vote come from?
I don't know.
We've got to fit.
There's got to be some ulterior motive there, right?
Has to be. What's your theory if you had to bet on it?
Well, I honestly, I didn't scroll through the coaches that have a vote, so I could look through it, and I'll bet you come up with like a list of 5 that it's got to be one of these guys. So we should do that and figure out who it is, because I think you can kind of narrow it down. It's like, when Kramer was trying to figure out Georgia's password, Bosco, and he was able to break it down step by step. I think that's how we could do it here to figure out who had the first place vote.
Yeah, my partner, Amanda, pointed out that I have the same password for everything. So I'm not going to share that with you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Exactly. Why would you have that password? I don't think an idiot would have that password. Spaceballs reference. Can't get enough of that. All right. So, Josh, as far as scrimmage number 2, it's right around the corner. And what do you think Tennessee would like to accomplish in order? Give me the top 3.
Well, number 1 is just big picture. Figure out who their guys are. Figure out who their guys that are going to lead in the secondary will be. And that's why I think getting Kamal Hadden back is important, because he should be one of those guys. I think he was targeted as a maybe number 1 corner for them heading into this season, but him not practicing and not scrimmaging can't help with that. Having Christian Charles back helps. So figuring out who their guys are, I would say figuring out who the starting left tackle is, and then who are the newcomers that are definitely going to play a role, and that can come back to the who are your guys, but also providing depth. Like, is Dylan Sampson ready to go at running back? Could he and Justin Williams Thomas help you right away? What is the role for Squirrel White at receiver or as a running option? He can be that on the offensive side. And then on defense, they know that Wesley Walker and Andre Turrentine can help this team, but how exactly? So I think who are your guys? So your starters, these are the guys that are going to lead us out against Ball State. I think that's important. Tackle if you can figure it out, and then newcomers that are ready to go, figuring that out.
Josh Ward, he is on the Sports Animal. He is brought to you by Zool Beer Company. Go to zoolbeer.com. Zool Beer Company. This is a production of Off the Hook Sports.